originally came to Woodstock in 1970 because my son had a friend who had moved to Kingston. So we dropped him at Kingston, came to Woodstock, and decided this is where we wanted to have a second home. Inadvertently, we thought, what could it hurt? We'll talk to a realtor and see what's available. We had been living in a place called Parkway Village, which was the United Nations housing development. And we found Irving Kalish, and he found us a piece of land. It all happened very quickly. Well, it was a process. First we came up on Friday night and left on Sunday. Then we said, why don't we leave on Monday because it will be less trafficked? And then we said, why should we wait until Friday night when we could leave on Thursday? So by that time, we really were spending a great deal of time up here, more than in the city. The building of the radio station was not really my idea. It was the idea of my crazy husband, who tried, after he put together a radio and television, a unit, and he said, I cannot get the local station. I did something wrong. Consequently, he learned there was no local station and said, why don't we start a local radio station in Woodstock? He was working full-time for the egg industry of America. However, he was their consultant, so he did not go into a 9-to-5 job. That gave us a great deal of flexibility in terms of spending so much time here. I also had a job, but that was in PR, and it did not take my full time. So Jerry decided that he would look into what one has to do to start a radio station. We had a bulldog. When we started working at the station, it was a very, very long day, and we couldn't come home and walk the dog. So we brought him with us, and he wandered in and out of the rooms in the station, and I think it was Richard Fusco who said, the bulldog of the Hudson Valley has just come in. And after that, that was the tagline. Fortunately, we didn't know what we didn't know, because we would not have started this enterprise had we realized how complicated this was and how costly it was to start a radio station. In our naivete, we thought, we could do this. We had to get an FCC attorney. We had to file an application with the FCC. It is a very long, involved, and costly process, and it took us almost 7 years. But since both of us were doing other things, this became like an avocation rather than a vocation. We started broadcasting in April of 1980.
When you and Jerry ran WDST, the programming was very diverse, and you won a number of broadcasting awards. Can you tell us about some of the highlights that occurred and why they are important to you?
Well, I think the most important one to me was meeting and spending time with then Governor Mario Cuomo, with whom I absolutely had a crush. This man was so charismatic, and winning the awards was such great fun because we were this little tiny station, and we went up against CBS and NBC and all of the other stations, all of whom were bigger and had a better, a longer track record. So it was great fun to be the big frogs in a big pond.
How did you come up with the diversity of programming for the
Uh,
station?
that was Jerry again. He felt, and this was really against the tide of what was happening in broadcasting, he felt that people didn't listen to the radio 24/7 and that they liked diverse things. So he thought he would segment the broadcasts so that we would have news and rock music and jazz and every kind of music that people would listen to, and that people would tune in to those programs that they wanted, that they liked. And this did not increase our ratings, but it did increase a diversity of an audience. We wanted to use, rather than disc jockeys, musicians. And we wanted to use musicians in their various disciplines. So one musician would come and we would talk to him, and then he had a friend who was into jazz. So Betty McDonald came, and then she had a friend who was into bluegrass. And so most of the people that worked for us found us. We paid very little in the beginning because we had a minuscule budget, but it was really great. And one young man just hung around all the time, and that was Ron Van Warmer. And we, after several weeks, we thought, does he work here? Because nobody really knew who he was. And he just said, I thought I'd hang out until you hired me, which we subsequently did.
Okay.
We sold the station in 1988. We loved running it, Jerry even more than I, but I found I had no other life because it was all-encompassing. And so somebody made us an offer we literally couldn't refuse. Jerry didn't want to sell, I did. It was a very good offer, and we did sell the station. Well, I ended up being joyously happy. He not so much, but we were by that time really entrenched in the community, and there were a lot of things that we both wanted to do. And for the first time in 10 years, we had time in which to do it. I worked with people on the Chamber of Commerce. I worked with the Ulster Association for Retarded People, as it was called then. I was asked to serve on the New Paltz Foundation Board. I worked at the soup kitchen. I ultimately started working at the planning board, on which I subsequently chaired. I was on the planning board for 11 or 12 years. I worked on the zoning revision committee. I served on the board of the Woodstock Jewish Congregation. It could go on forever. If there was a committee, they asked me to serve on it. I enjoyed very much working on the planning board because I really felt that that would keep the community a small and diverse community without having land uses that would change the feeling of the community. So I did enjoy the planning board, and one other thing I did was work on the board of an organization called Circle of Friends for the Dying, which was started to have a home for people in their final months of living. So that too was very gratifying. I love the Woodstock community. I feel a part of it. I'm not sure the natives feel that I'm a native, but I have been here a long time. I love it, and I really feel a part of it. I am an optimistic person. I feel that I can and do make a difference, and I enjoy being part of the life around me. I never want to be a victim. By being involved, you're not a victim, you're a doer. I had some severe losses in my life of both my son and my husband, and it would have been very easy to fall into the well of despair. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to go on living and contributing to my community. And it, like everyone who contributes, I got more out of it than the people that I helped.
How would you describe the basic qualities of Woodstock?
Nutty. I love Woodstock. I found at one point that it was not as liberal and open-minded as I had originally thought. I know that when the monastery wanted to expand, there was a tremendous amount of antagonism, and that surprised me a great deal. But I think there were enough people in Woodstock and on the planning board, fortunately, to allow the monastery to expand. But it opened my eyes to the NIMBY quality that does exist in all communities. I don't know that it has changed all that much. I think that it kind of goes on. Maybe the people don't I mean, their hair isn't as long, and there's not as much open smoking of weed on the village green. But all in all, I honestly feel it hasn't changed all that much.
Do you have a favorite story about Woodstock?
Well, I'm not sure it's a favorite story about Woodstock, but I think it proves that Woodstock really is the center of the earth. I had some people over for dinner maybe 2 years ago, and one of the people had just moved from Beijing to Saugerties, which is, a natural progression, you can understand. And one of my other guests said, "Oh, I was in Beijing. Do you know my friend so-and-so?" And they said, "Well, yes, of course, we're close friends." So in Woodstock, in my house, I had two people who knew each other from a stay in Beijing. And I think that's prototypical of what happens in Woodstock. My final words go back to my feeling about life. I think if people choose life, then they will have a good life. I think there were a multiplicity of reasons that we felt at home in Woodstock almost immediately. I think each of us had at one point visited, but it was quite beautiful. We were taken with the natural beauty. It was close enough to New York, so we knew we could get up here frequently. My son had a friend in Kingston, and everyone we met appealed to us. They were friendly. When we tried to get out of a parking space, a car stopped and allowed us to leave. It wasn't one thing, but it was a feeling that this is the place that we belonged. And we were right. The people in Woodstock responded very affirmatively to having its own radio station. it really became, WDST became not our station, Jerry's and mine, but it really became Woodstock station, and the response to it was extremely, extremely positive.
Did the programming on the station change as you progressed
Oh,
in
of
years?
Oh, of course the programming changed. When we were started, though we both had backgrounds in media, we were kind of rank amateurs. So we would try something, and if it didn't work, we would try something else that did work. Uh, we had contributions from our staff, which were very meaningful. Uh, Sometimes we would, like, a friend of mine was Judith Christ, and we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if Judith would have a program? Well, Judith was wonderful, and she knew a lot about movies, but the program wasn't wonderful. So we kind of phased it out and started something else. So yes, the programming changed and grew, and we ended up, I think, with a format, though very eclectic, worked for our community. That's a very, you have to know Jerry to know that he came up with crazy ideas about a lot of things. I think as he felt that people liked to be read to, and he turned out to be right. It probably wasn't the most listened to program on radio, but those that were addicted to it loved it, and he gave him a chance to choose what he wanted people to hear. I must say, Jerry and I have done a lot of traveling throughout the world, and when we mention Woodstock, at least the grown-ups remember the festival and know the name Woodstock. The kids not so much, but they love the idea of a music community that had this great influx of talent, and really Jerry's voice was recognized by hundreds of people as we traveled, who obviously heard him on the radio, and his voice being very distinctive. They, everybody, many people that we met knew about Woodstock, knew about him, and just loved the idea. I don't think there was much of a difference in the way people reacted. The new people from New York, or the people that had been here for a long time, they all found something that related to them. It was, back to Jerry's reading program. If we would go out in the town and we would see a group of construction workers listening to Jerry read a story at 10 o'clock in the morning, it kind of surprised us. And through the years, I have heard from various people who knew about the station, listened to the station intermittently, people I didn't know then, subsequently spoken to, and they all found something in it that they loved. So the concept was really a good one. My grandson and I were seated in a little alcove, and there were just 2 tables in the alcove. He and I, and then a group of about 8 or 10 people. And since I'm a notorious eavesdropper, I was listening to their conversation, and I heard not the whole thing, but words. Bulldog, broadcast, ratings. So I realized that they were media people. And then as I listened further, I realized they were local media people. And my grandson said, they're talking about WDST. His hearing is better than mine. And I said, yes, I know they are. He said, are you going to tell them that you were the owner of the station. I said, yeah, I don't think so. But then as we were getting up to leave, I went over to their table, which was really just 2 feet away from ours, and I said, do you people work for a radio station? And they said, yes. I said, do you work for WDST? And they said, yes. And I said, well, I've been listening to your conversation. I just want you to know that I'm Sasha Gillman, and they all said, we know who you are. You started the station. I said, yes, I did. And they said, will you come by and do an interview for us? And I said, yeah, I will. But they knew who I was. We talked about the station. And there was one of those little coincidental stories that really occur frequently. I originally worked for NBC in Chicago, and I was offered a job by the agency when they came to supervise some of the commercials. And as soon as I was offered a job, I decided, I'm going to New York, I'm going to go home and I'm going to pack. And I said to my friend, who was an actress, her name was Betsy Palmer, and I said, I've been offered a job and I'm going to New York. And she said, I'm going home to pack, I'm coming with you. So she and I came to New York together, and we were roommates. She went on to acting fame. I worked for an agency, and then I worked for several media companies, and did some PR work while I was waiting for the station to emerge from the FCC. And Jerry also was in public relations and advertising, and so our careers were very media savvy. When Betsy Palmer and I first came to New York, we were both in our early 20s, very well educated, but so surprisingly naive, you could not believe it. So I think one of the stories, which was so great, we picked up a guy in the park. I thought she knew him, she thought I knew him. However, neither of us really knew him, but we did give him our address and phone number, as we were wont to do, and he called us that evening and said he would like to come over with some friends. And we thought, why not? We were as dumb as dirt. But in those days, we were, I think, comparatively safe. And he came over with his friends. One of them was Marlon Brando. The other was Wally Cox, who was a television comedian at the time, and our friend Sam. And the five of us got to be very, very good friends. This was obviously prior to Marlon Brando's great fame, and Betsy Palmer always told the story that Marlon Brando liked me better than he liked her.